Here with this week's hottest stories in the investment world, this is Zach's Friday Finish Line.
Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the Zach's Friday Finish Line.
Today, we are going to be speaking with Bryce Tillery, who is the managing partner at Eve Capital, which is the sponsor of the Augmented and Virtual Reality ETF, the Tactile Analytics ETF, trading under the ticker ARVR.
ARVR is listed on CBOE and is the first augmented and virtual reality focused ETF to hit the market.
We were able to talk to Bryce about the fund, as well as the latest trends in the augmented reality, virtual reality space, and why he thinks this growing sector is an attractive opportunity for investors. Check it out.
So thanks for joining us, Bryce. And we wanted to begin with more of a broad look at AR and VR. For those listeners with little knowledge of the two technologies, can you help define or explain the difference between augmented and virtual reality?
Sure. It's actually pretty much exactly what the name implies. Virtual reality is probably the one we're most, I would say the population is most familiar with, especially, VR in the 90s. It was very poor quality. But really, virtual reality immerses the user in a fully digital kind of artificial environment. The idea, if you could almost put it this way, is to escape reality. It's completely immersive. It's supposed to transport you somewhere else. And I can talk about some of those uses later, whether it's from entertainment to medical to psychological. So there's a lot of use for VR. Augmented reality, though, is almost just the opposite. It's about staying in the real world. It's about overlaying a digital world on top of the real world. This is very similar to mixed reality as well. They're kind of used interchangeably to a degree. But augmented reality, if you can think of a very easy early on base case use, would be like a heads-up display, for example, in a car. That's a type of augmented reality. For those who might have children or maybe they themselves partook in it, Pokemon Go, that was a very basic use of augmented reality, but obviously enticed a lot of people out there. Snapchat is probably right now the most popular use of it as well. People do the overlaid features and things like that within Snapchat. So they estimate that over 51 million people, at least in the U.S. alone, will probably be using augmented reality of some kind by the end of this year. Some of those uses are better than others.
Well, I'm personally still looking forward to the Harry Potter version of Pokemon Go, which is due out, and that'll get me definitely on the AR train myself. But as you started kind of hinting at there, AR and VR has very quickly impacted the world and touched almost every industry, from entertainment and tech to manufacturing and healthcare. In your view, what industries have been impacted the most? And that can be positive impacts, negative impacts. Like, feel free to share wherever your perspective leads you there.
It's important to talk about these when we think of, especially in regards to an ETF like this. There's major impact on how it's going to impact consumers, but then there's also major impact on how it's going to affect the enterprise side, which is what we really don't see on a day-to-day basis. But obviously, one of the most noticeable things that will happen between now and the next 10 years is just kind of the idea of the smartphone. Sales in smartphones have actually started to decline in the past year and a half. And this really isn't due to augmented reality, but just kind of saturation of the smartphone market in general. And the next phase of that is kind of going more toward a better version of what Google Glass was, or what some of the augmented reality headset displays are out there. But probably one of the best uses, if we focus in on VR first, obviously video games, media, entertainment, and as much as people, for a long time have thought video games are something that just children do, the mobile gaming platform is it's one of the largest industries in the world, actually. And it's just the returns in that space have been massive as well. Then there's film and media. If you even go on YouTube now, you'll see a lot of the 360 videos will have this little kind of cardboard sign next to them that is Google Cardboard. And this allows the user to put their phone into these Google Cardboard glasses, which then cost as little as $10, and kind of get a 360 experience. A really, really interesting uses of VR that have had a major impact. The New York Times is using it for this as well, but also psychologists, is just from an empathy standpoint, being able to put yourselves into somebody else's shoes. I mean, it's, obviously it's not a complete replacement, and you can never truly experience, unless you're there, a tragedy like a hurricane or an earthquake. But by utilizing VR, you can kind of get a better idea of it. And that's something that psychologists, sociologists, and things like that are really excited for in the space. Another area that was one of the early adopters of virtual reality, but also augmented reality, is in the medical space. And on the medical side, they're using virtual reality to train students, so residences and things like that. They're also using it to train residences and new doctors on things like the Da Vinci system, which is, if you're aware, is that the robotic system that they use for surgeries and things like that. But the nice thing is, because it is robotic, you can actually do it in VR, and it's a great way to train. So when you go into the real thing, augmented reality, though, they are utilizing it to overlay organs, skeletons, and things like that, so people can really identify where the problems are with people. So you are seeing doctors utilizing augmented reality systems. It is definitely new. A very interesting thing is, not a doctor, but my neighbor, actually, he's an architect for hospitals. And when they design a new hospital, often the doctors will want a room designed a certain way if they're going to be doing surgeries in it and things like that. So what they'll do, and this kind of blends in a little bit with building, architects, things like that, but what they'll do is they'll build a mock-up of the room, usually with cardboard. Then they'll build a nicer mock-up. Then they'll build even a nicer mock-up. But once it gets approved, then they'll build kind of the final version. That is costly. It takes time. But now they do everything in VR. So it's very interesting. They will design kind of the hospital room all in VR. They'll bring the surgeons in and the hospital staff in, so they can actually experience what that room would be like. And then they will get the approval and build it. So they cut their time down by almost 80%, and their costs are cut way down. So from a productivity standpoint, it's been very impactful. And this isn't 10 years in the future. They're doing this right now. Another industry that will be, when you're looking towards where is this headed, that could actually be utilized today, but obviously it's going to take some society changes. I think most people would agree that the public school system in this country, even private schools and things like that, everyone's talking about overcrowded classrooms, clean environments, and basically a lot of that can be eliminated through VR. I mean, if you can imagine having one fifth grade teacher teaching 10,000 kids, and can be accomplished through VR. I mean, there's a lot to work out there, but the productivity that comes with advancements and such major advancements in tech like this is pretty amazing when you think about it. And kind of, jumping industries a little bit from in a kind of an engineering and industrial use especially, Boeing just announced this year that they are adding even more augmented reality capabilities. They made a private investment in a company that specifically does AR. And essentially, they're using AR to overlay. In each 747 jet, there's about 130 miles of wire that's rigged to a wiring harness. And they have cut their wiring time down by almost 30% and their mistakes down to literally zero, utilizing an AR system. It's pretty amazing because they can overlay where the wires need to be and where they need to lay them in those planes. So it's useful for on-the-job training. There's a very great video out there where you can see sewer lines and utility lines running through the street. So construction workers are using glasses. Everyone loves it when they cut their power or their internet goes out because they're building the building's going up next to them or something.
Sorry to butt in, but to hear all of these real world applications of augmented reality and virtual reality, because for me, I still only think of augmented reality as Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
And it is still, it's every day it's getting so much bigger and bigger and bigger. And everyday people and everyday workers in this country are using it like you said, to fix
Be more
streets
efficient.
and there's just so many things that it can be used for now.
The latest one I saw was that Macy's is expanding its use of AR for furniture shopping, which I thought was like another one I had never thought of before, but it makes sense. Like it solves the problem of how do I envision this furniture fitting into a certain space.
Yeah, definitely.
Boom, AR, fixes, what might be a small problem, but a problem nonetheless.
Yeah, it definitely will help, and everyone's kind of expecting to cut down on returns and things like that. This is part of the reason Amazon just patented an augmented reality mirror, telling when they're going to bring it out. But the idea was you could just literally try on clothes and shop at home.
Amazing.
Oh,
And this,
Right, yeah.
right, this is a big issue for Amazon too on returns and things like that. This is why even on clothing, Amazon doesn't have the sales that they would like, because a lot of people want to try stuff on. They want to see how it looks and things like that. But an AR is going to solve a lot of that for the people who just like to shop from home.
And I am one of those, one of those people.
Yeah. Who wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
So but it is one of the most exciting spaces out there. I mean, originally, when we kind of had this idea for an ETF, we've had a lot of questions of, well, is it too early to be invested in a space like this? And I don't think it is at all. The hardest part about kind of this space is a lot of it is the same major players that you will find, in the smartphone space or in the electronic space. But there's more than that. It's the entire AR and VR value chain. And essentially, they're looking at the sensors, the display manufacturers. So really, this is going to be kind of the next computing push going forward. And it will probably kind of be right alongside. I don't know if you've heard people talking about 5G wireless, but it will kind of be that next push to go out there with 5G, because we'll kind of have the wireless power and the computing power to handle things like VR and AR.
So kind of going off of that, where do you see, I guess, AR and VR, or how do you see it looking in like 15 to 20 years? Like, do you see, we see like these, like the real world applications like being used in 2018, but I feel like with the show kind of like, I don't know if you watch Black Mirror, but it has like, I feel like we see like applications of AR and VR in that show that are like super scary and like I don't necessarily know if like we want that technology, but not that it would end up that way, but like how do you see it evolving?
And is it going to evolve into something terrifying?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll tell you guys a little interesting fact very quick that people have realized they can use VR for. There's this whole fear of this from an artificial intelligence standpoint, obviously. But when you're running AI, you have to train, robots and AI in real world environments, right? Especially if you're looking at from a robotic perspective, if you're trying to teach a robot how to walk, it has to practice that, right? Just like a human would. But what's really interesting is they're actually now hooking robots up to virtual reality, but they're not actually hooking them to virtual reality. They're doing it all digitally. So they can run these simulations they can run literally millions of simulations in a day. So that's kind of a little creepy, but I don't think we need to be worried about that yet.
I mean, that's how those robot dogs took over. Yeah. I don't know if you saw that one episode
from Black Mirror.
Yeah.
So, but I definitely don't think if you really want to know what the world's going to look like in 15 or 20 years with VR and AR, I think the best place and most realistic place to look is just in your workspace. I think 100% it's a foregone conclusion that cell phones are essentially dead. And, we're talking 15, 20 years. I'm not talking the next 5.
Sure.
Cell phones are essentially dead. You're wearing glasses. There's no way that will be there for contacts or anything like that you see in Black Mirror. And also, if you just think of your office space, even, for those people who work in an office, what's on everybody's desk? It's screens. No one will be buying screens anymore because there will be no need at all. The glasses can replace that. You can create digital artificial work environments. On-the-job training is very important. I mean, you might not want to do it, but you will probably it'll be much easier for you to do plumbing at home. You can probably do work on your car because you can overlay things. People can talk to you. They can circle stuff. You can get, on-site help for those DIY people out there. It's going to be fantastic. So again, productivity, I think, will just be increased massively in the next 15 to 20 years. I think the biggest fear of everyone will be, it's kind of like all the jokes came out when Google Glass was around with all the pop-ups and things like that. You'll be walking down the street and get ads and pop-ups right in front of your eyes. That might be the most annoying thing going forward. But I think that is a possibility for sure. But I think we can just count on almost either way another world overlaid on top of ours, and we are going to be there. I mean, things have already been brought up. People are buying up digital real estate right now for advertisements. So, like, what do you do if somebody puts a McDonald's sign in your front lawn, but digitally, right? So, who owns those rights?
Right.
So, it does raise a whole host of other questions. But we really see this space in this ETF as when people are investing in technology, you just can't buy the NASDAQ anymore and think you're getting growth. Tech is evolving, so your cutting edge tech is really AI, it's robotics, it's AR and VR, and those are kind of really the growth sectors that are going to be driving our economy, especially on the tech side for the next 15, 20 years. So we see this as a very long-term play, and it's definitely not too early either, even though there are less pure plays out there to get into the space. Some of the leaders are companies like Google and Apple.
I think that's actually the perfect transition, because we want to wrap things up a little bit by talking more specifically about the ETF. It's unique because it's really the first of its kind, the first augmented and virtual reality focused ETF to be brought to the market. For investors, even our listeners looking to make a play in this industry, what do you think makes an ETF a better option to invest in the space over other methods, like maybe just focusing on those individual pure plays that you mentioned?
I mean, diversification is always, can always be a good idea, and it always helps from a risk reduction standpoint. But I think, too, unless you're spending your day all day doing research in the ARVR space, it's difficult to kind of call who the winners and losers are going to be. We hired the company Tactile Analytics, they're a research firm focused on AR and VR, to help decide what that universe should be. And then that universe is given over to the index provider, which is EQM. And they really then put the quantitative screens on top of it. They make sure that the stocks meet some of the liquidity requirements. They do the quarterly rebalances and things like that. But really, somebody could. I mean, I would encourage somebody definitely do your research, and if there's some single names out there you really like, I would go buy them. But really, Tactile Analytics has kind of done the hard work for most people. And if you want to kind of stay focused in this space for the next 10 years, it's a great place to be.
We want to thank Bryce for joining us, and thank you for tuning in. See you next time.